Two Karen parents endanger their own child and other children at the zoo. So the zoo I work at has a very strict policy of no kid scooters for children that are older than 3 years old. If a child needs a scooter because they can't really walk on their own yet, it is allowed. But when a child is able to walk and just use the scooter to play on and to move freely, it's strictly prohibited, especially when they go too fast. This is mainly for safety reasons. Children on scooters can hit or run over other children. They can fall and hurt themselves. They could even accidentally fall into some of the animal enclosures. Some of the enclosures have very low fences, for example the beavers or the porcupines, and if a child is fast enough, it is definitely possible that they can accidentally launch themselves into one of them should their scooters bump into something. It has happened before, hence the creation of the rule. So during one of my shifts a couple of days ago, I was scanning tickets at the entrance of the zoo. I see these two parents and their young daughter approaching, and the daughter is speeding towards the entrance on a kid scooter. She's visibly older than 3 years old. I ask the parents how old she is when I go and scan their tickets. They tell me that she's 5, to which I then explain the rule of the kid scooter to them and kindly ask them if they can hand the scooter at the cash register booth so they can keep it safe for them while they visit the zoo, and that they can come pick up the scooter after their visit. They are shocked when I tell them and demand to know why they can't have their daughter keep her scooter. I explain the reasons behind the rule and that we really cannot make exceptions. They are visibly angry and ask several times for me to make an exception for their daughter. I tell them no once again, and it really is for their daughter's own safety. I kindly ask them again to hand the scooter in or not enter the zoo if they really don't want to take their daughter's scooter away. The daughter then starts crying, and these two entitled Karen parents get angry at me and say, "Look what you did to our daughter. You made her upset. You ruined her day now." Mind you, it was a very busy day at the zoo. People were waiting in line for me to scan their tickets, and they were taking up a lot of my time. I could tell the people behind them were starting to get upset, and I once again insisted that they had to hand the scooter in or leave. I then just decided to go and help the other guests with their tickets. The entitled Karens stayed right next to me at the entrance, literally blocking half of the entryway with their crying child, calling me an awful, mean woman, and kept on complaining. I ignored it and continued to help the other guests. After about 15 minutes of them just standing there and making a scene, I eventually saw them walk over to the cash register booth, and I assumed they were finally handing in the scooter. Now, there's another small entrance right next to the cash register booth that is meant for people who bought their tickets there to enter the zoo without having to stand in yet another line after waiting in line for the cash register. And apparently, these two entitled Karens use that entrance to secretly enter the zoo with the scooter. I couldn't see them from where I was scanning tickets, and I was too busy to notice. An hour or two later, while I'm doing a cash register shift, I suddenly hear a lot of commotion coming from my supervisors, who are sitting in an office right behind the cash registers. They're on the phone with the head of the zoo security guards. I can tell that something bad and shocking must have happened from the tone in their voices, and once they've hung up, I ask them what happened. Apparently, the security guards had just escorted a family out of the zoo because their daughter was speeding through the zoo on her child's scooter and almost hit a few other children. Some had apparently fallen when trying to avoid her and injured themselves. When one of the security guards came up to the parents to tell them that they're not allowed to have scooters with them and that the daughter immediately needs to get off her scooter, the parents started yelling at the security guard, and apparently the daughter sped from the guard and in the process hits the side of a brick fence of a meerkat enclosure, and the scooter fell into the enclosure as a result. The meerkats, of course, freaked out and immediately hurried to the inside area of their enclosure, but some became so stressed that they almost escaped from the enclosure. Their caretaker had to be called in just to calm them down enough and distract them with food while the security guards tried to retrieve the scooter. Meanwhile, the child cried loudly, and the entitled parents yelled at the security guard that this was his fault and that he almost caused her daughter to fall into the enclosure. Other security guards had come to the scene, and the parents and their daughter were immediately kicked out of the zoo. And apparently, they never stopped blaming the security guards for what had happened. They were also members of the zoo, and my supervisors immediately revoked their membership. I'm not sure if they're now outright banned from the zoo, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised. This goes to show you that there are rules in place for certain organizations or facilities for a reason. I think back to the Harambe incident from 2016. I mean, if these parents had just listened, they could have avoided this disaster altogether. Some of these animals at the zoo may seem cuddly and adorable, but if you tick them off and stress them out enough, they'll freak out and become wild, ferocious animals. Meerkats are no exception. And the fact that they snuck this scooter into this zoo and caused other children to get hurt in the process is like a lawsuit waiting to happen. So at the end of the day, you need to learn how to follow the rules or get lost. And these two parents probably should have picked the first option.
The full version of this story is on the Am I the Jerk YouTube channel, so check out the link in the description for it, and if there are any updates, that's where they'll be. And if you happen to use TikTok, even if it's only every once in a while, I definitely would recommend checking out the Am I the Jerk TikTok at Am I the Jerk. It's a great way to catch up on some old and new random stories here we have on the channel, but you might not actually ever be able to see them over here on YouTube. So check out the Am I the Jerk TikTok.